So we've been talking about this deal with Jake Paul in the PFL for a while now, and we've been wondering, when is he actually going to fight an MMA match? We thought it was coming up soon. I thought he was teasing an MMA fight, but the promotion is DAZN. They don't put on MMA fights, so it's clearly not an MMA fight with the PFL. A lot of people have been wanting that Jake Paul Nate Diaz rematch, and it looked like it was gonna happen because Jake and his team says they sent over a $10 to $15 million contract over to Nate Diaz. So, even though Nate Diaz said, I don't want to fight anywhere else but the UFC, $10 to $15 million is $10 to $15 million Latin dollars, you know what I mean? So he's going to take that shit. Regardless of where it is, what organization, I expect Nate Diaz to take this. But he might have just exposed Jake Paul's plans. So Nate Diaz tweets out, this effort talking like he wants to fight. I'm ready to fight tonight. This B ain't ready till 2025. So Jake Paul sends over the contract and it says to fight in 2025. That is actually really interesting because how many more fights does Jake plan on having in boxing? Jake is a very, very smart marketer, and so is his team. They're very smart with who they pick to fight, hence why his record is full of super old retired MMA fighters. He markets himself very well, and he's very smart with how he picks fights. If they sent him over a contract for 2025, I think it could be for either one of two reasons. Either number one, it's a scapegoat way. If he were to lose in boxing, he has the ability to still fight and maybe get that win back. Say Tommy Fury, maybe a trilogy with Tommy Fury. He lost the first fight. Maybe he plans on winning the second, going for a trilogy before he heads over to MMA and calling it quits there. Or he just wants a lot of time to really focus on MMA to get ready for someone like Nate Diaz. To be honest, I wasn't expecting him to go right over to MMA. I know people are saying he has a wrestling background, but let's be real. How much really does wrestling help you in there? You need to have jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a completely different sport, and wrestling, positions that would be good for you in wrestling actually put you in terrible positions when you're going up against someone who does jiu-jitsu. And someone like Nate Diaz, who is a real Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt and is a really good submission artist, especially off of his back. You do not want to be on the ground with this guy. I expect Jake Paul, to be honest, to actually want to stand up with Nate Diaz. I don't expect Jake to use his wrestling at all. To be honest, if they were to fight in MMA, I expect Jake to throw a lot of leg kicks and try to box him. That's what I think is going to be Jake Paul's strategy. I think he's going to avoid the ground, and Nate Diaz is actually the perfect opponent because he's the type of guy that can get touched up on the feet and still not go for takedowns. As we saw for his fight against Leon Edwards, the guy will get touched up on the feet, get banged up big time, and still not shoot for takedowns or anything like that, even though he has a very superior jiu-jitsu ground game. So someone like Nate Diaz is actually a really good opponent for Jake Paul. Someone that's willing to stand, that might not have the best stand-up. But 2025 just seems like such a long time from now. I'm just not sure why he chose to push it back that far. And when in 2025 would it be? Would it be early 2025, mid, end? Because if we're talking the end of 2025, we're talking a whole 2 years from now. So what does he plan on doing in the next 2 years? Does he plan on boxing? Does he plan on just training? I would expect that it would probably be January of 2025 if I were to guess, but who knows? But like I said, $10 to $15 million is a whole lot of money that I'm sure Nate Diaz doesn't mind taking. And I'm definitely sure Nate Diaz is extremely positive he will take Jake Paul out of there. So why not? It might seem like a very easy payday to him. The only question is, though, is if he gives Jake Paul the amount of time to prepare for this fight and he were to go out there and lose, how damaging would this be to Nate Diaz's reputation? I mean, I know a lot of people out there might think it's not all that damaging because he's retired. He's a much older guy. He was heading his way out. He's lost many fights. But I know there's some people out there that might think, Nate Diaz losing to Jake Paul is a complete embarrassment, and maybe even going as far as saying he shouldn't be a UFC legend due to having such a big loss like that on his MMA record. In my opinion, I think it would be Nate Diaz's best interest to try to make this fight happen as soon as possible. Do not let Jake prepare for this. Do not give Jake a whole bunch of time to prepare for this fight, because the more you wait, the more you let him prepare, the harder the fight is going to be. But for Jake Paul, I think it's very, very smart sending over a contract to try to set the fight for 2025. I think it's extremely smart because it gives you that cushion to whoever his next opponent is. If he were to lose, he can do a rematch, or he still has enough time to do that Tommy Fury rematch or trilogy, should he win if they fight again. And if he does want to just leave boxing, he also gives himself a lot of time to prepare for an MMA fight, which, like I said, I'm expecting him to utilize this time to most likely work on takedown defense, especially if he's fighting Nate Diaz. If he's fighting a striker, I expect him to work a lot more on his wrestling. But if he's fighting someone like Nate Diaz, I think it's a perfect matchup for him. And if he signs for the year 2025, man, that gives him plenty of time to get ready for that fight. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about this. What do you think of Jake sending Nate Diaz over a contract for the year 2025? That's still a really long time. Do you think it's because he's trying to do some more boxing? Or do you think it's because he just wants a lot of time to prepare for an MMA match? As always, thank you all so much for the support, and I'll catch you in the next video.